Welcome to week 2 of the Reassembling Reality, Reframing Science and Religion lectures, part of the Hong Kong U Common Core course on science and religion. So this week we're going to be looking at acupuncture. Now, last week we considered frames that didn't quite fit. We looked at science and religion and how we think of science and religion, how we think of science, how we think of religion. And then we compared it to thinking of Israel and Egypt, where we said the things there, the bits and pieces and the people doing stuff have been in Israel for ages, and they've been in Egypt for ages. But the category, the way we think of them, is not this universal fixed for all time, but does change over time, and also changes for science and religion across space. So saying, okay, the nature of science and the nature of religion changes over time and over space, and how things look now in Hong Kong might not be the way things used to look 100 years ago in Europe, for example. And so we saw that these frames didn't really fit, and we made various claims like saying we can mix these and should mix these, and in order to understand the situation need to mix these categories that we tend to think of. So this week we're going to delve into that a bit and look at trying to analyze acupuncture and say, does this fit under the science category, or does this fit better under the religion category, or does it seem to fit under both? Or is it neither? Is it something else altogether, or is it nothing at all? Is it just random thoughts that people come up with that make no sense at all? That's today's question. So let's dive in. In Hong Kong, and for those of you who are based in Hong Kong, you will know this scene very well. In Hong Kong, we have shops that look like this. And when I have friends who come and visit, they look at these shops and they say, is that shop selling food or is it selling medicine? And it's a slightly tricky question to answer. And we say, well, why should it be so tricky? I mean, we know what food looks like, and we know what medicine looks like. So why can't we answer it for this shop? Why is it difficult for this shop? Because if we don't even know what's food and what's medicine, how are we going to do something as abstract and up there as what's science and religion? So we're going to start by looking at the really simple case of, can we identify food when we see it? So how do we do it normally? Okay, we know what medicine looks like, right? Medicine comes in a little pill. And medicine is also, you can classify it as not food, right? Medicine and food are not the same thing. Medicine comes in a little pill, food comes in a chicken. And food is not medicine. We love our dichotomies. We've got food, medicine, dichotomy, we're good to go. So medicine has the property of being healing, and food has the property of being nourishing. Medicine, the key thing when you look on the bottle is the active ingredient. And food, the key thing when you look on the packet is the nutrients. They don't give you the active ingredients of your chicken, they give you the nutritional information. When you have medicine, you send it off for drug trials. They have to go and check that it works, that it does what it's supposed to do. And when you have a chicken, does this chicken work? Does it taste good? I mean, no one cares if your medicine tastes good. Probably if it tastes bad, it's probably doing something better, right? Whereas food has to pass the taste test, something that medicine never worries about. Medicine is tremendously regulated, right? You can't just send out medicine without running it past the various drugs agencies, right? A roast chicken, I mean, no one says, here's a lemon that I've just plucked off a tree. Is it regulated? No, it's food. It just, you eat it. So we can tell the difference between medicine and food. We know what these things do. Which leads us to a problem when you have a cold and your grandma gives you chicken soup. Because is chicken soup food or medicine? She's given it to you because you're sick. So that's kind of medicine, but you eat it and it also fills you up. It's nourishing, so it seems to be food. And it definitely has nutrition in it, so it seems to be food, but it also seems to make you better. There are medics who can now look at what the active ingredients are in chicken soup, and they write medical scientific journal papers on it, and they say this is why why it has medicinal value. And your grandma doesn't care what the research papers say. She says, I don't care if you found out that it was healing or it wasn't healing. I'm still going to give it to my grandkids when they're sick because it's chicken soup and you need to have chicken soup. So it seems to be both. And grandma doesn't care which one it is. Now, academics sitting writing papers are entirely welcome to tie their hands and say, we have to classify this as food, or we have to classify this as medicine. And that they're welcome to do that. And grandma is welcome to ignore them completely. Do we need to answer the question, is this chicken soup medicine or food? Are we happy to say it's both? Are we happy to, This isn't also to say that medicine is a meaningless category. Medicine is definitely a real thing, and it doesn't mean that food is a meaningless category. I mean, food is a thing, but it does, for example, mean, it maybe opens up our eyes to the possibilities of saying, well, hey, what would happen if people that made food thought of, for example, ways that it could be healing? What would happen if people who made medicine thought of ways that, for example, it could taste good? Are there ways in which these two worlds don't have to be so separate? Can they somehow connect to each other? And if we get out of our silos of saying, well, we have to classify it as food or medicine, well, maybe we can do interesting things. And so, as with chicken soup, this is what these mushroom shops are in Hong Kong, right? So Hong Kong is very comfortable with the idea of things not really being food or medicine in the way that Western people like to divide them up. And in fact, when we look at it and we think of chicken soup, I mean, people in Europe and America eat chicken soup and they're very happy with that. And the strange thing that we're going to come to later is we notice that people in the West say, okay, it's either food or it's medicine, and they also eat chicken soup and don't think this is strange. So something that we're going to return to is we're going to notice that there are sort of people come over to Asia and they look at this shop and they say, is it food or is it medicine? And they think this is some big scandal that you can't categorize it into the categories that they're used to. And they never realize that most of the stuff they do, like eating chicken soup, also doesn't fit into the categories that they're used to. But just because they're so used to it, they never even noticed there was a problem. So thinking about Asian things can highlight to us, in fact, let us look with fresh eyes at the stuff that was going on in the West already, and we just didn't notice was an interesting thing. So much for soup. Let's turn to acupuncture. Is acupuncture science or religion? So last week we put up these two lists, and two-listism, we argued, causes some problems, and it's possibly not surprising to realize that two-listism is going to cause us problems this lecture as well. But let's try and analyze acupuncture with respect to two-listism and see what happens. Now, a lot of people in the West view acupuncture as being a little bit strange, a little bit esoteric, and they're kind of scared by it. And it's not necessarily surprising. I mean, it's non-physical, right? There's this chi stuff that flows around you, this immaterial, ineffable. I mean, what's chi? It's like it's life force. It's ineffable. It's mystical, right? You've got like crystals and chakras and who knows what you've got. I mean, it's something mystical. And somehow I can stick a pin in your foot and your headache goes away. That's miraculous. So we look at this and we say, it's pretty clear, thanks be to two-listism, it's pretty clear that acupuncture is religious. I mean, that's cut and dried. Seems good. We think that two-listism is going to cause us problems. We're going to return to this list. We're going to see it again later in the lecture. Anyway, so it's religion and it's not science. It's just not science, guys. Just get with the program. Okay, end of the lecture. You've learned that one. Actually, no. Okay, it's more interesting than that. Here we go. Let's look at if we know now it's religion. Okay, what was it? What did it used to be? Okay, well, back in the days of the Yellow Emperor. I mean, if you look at the origins of acupuncture, it was at the time inseparable from cultic practices at the time. It was inseparable from moral teachings. It was inseparable from ideas that were going on in the religious milieu. For what it's worth, that doesn't exclude it from being medicine, because if you look at Western medicine, well, okay, Galen was a pagan. Western medicine, when it originated with Galen, was completely inseparable from cultic practices. It's not any coincidence that pharmacology, the basic root word in Greek, means spell or charm or filter or medicine. I mean, they just didn't have this distinction between poison, medicine, spell, charm, because the boundaries between medicine and religion and science were at somewhere between porous and non-existent. I mean, ideas flowed back and forth. So it comes from this pagan culture that just hadn't grasped the idea that there is a separation, there can be a separation between medical ideas and religious ideas. Now, in the West, of course, we've managed to secularize medicine. Okay, we've managed to strip away everything that's mystical and religious and so on and so forth. Okay, when someone sticks a needle in you, you don't care. You know, they might have religious ideas, right? They might care about, you know, transcendent things or the afterlife or transubstantiation or whatever you want, right? But that doesn't change the way they stick a needle in you. So we have here are their scientific ideas. This is what they're doing, and then their religious ideas we can set to one side. That stays in the private sphere, and the public stuff that involves you going out to somewhere where they stick a needle in you, that's public, that's scientific, that's fine, and we can keep the two separate. Now, that's worked really well in the West. It's not worked quite as well as we might hope in this ideal separation, because there are still sort of religious feeling questions that we ask. So this particular needle here, this is giving a stem cell treatment, and so stem cells. Okay, so this seems like an ethical question, and ethics sounds a bit like a religious question, but that's okay. We've got like basic medicine, and then we're going to bolt the ethical questions on to the side, and we can have, you know, ethicists can think about that. We give them the answers. We say, okay, here's a list of checkboxes. You need to make sure that you're not breaking the rules. But the ethics, the religious flavored things, we just bolt onto the side of medicine, and medicine proper stays nice and secular. Now, for what it's worth, you can do the same with acupuncture. You can take this originally mixed idea that takes all these things together, and you can strip out all of the mystical stuff. You can, I mean, if compare these two things, right? Okay, so this picture here is from the NIH, and obviously the NIH is doing science, and so to do something scientifically, you put gloves on, because science is impersonal. If you're actually making physical skin-to-skin contact, that's a bit personal. That's not really scientific. So you can see here, when a Western medic gives you an injection, they put gloves on because that makes it a bit more impersonal. And when you want to be a scientist or a proper medic doing acupuncture, you put gloves on, because this makes it impersonal, which means that we know we're moving across onto our science list. So the question is, can we really do this with acupuncture? Can we strip out this mystical, religious, ineffable stuff and just make it properly secularized, maybe with a little bit of religious stuff that we just bolt on that doesn't change the sort of scientific acupuncture proper? Well, if we look in how do we get from where we were to where we are now? How do we do this process of secularization? What happens over these thousands of years? It turns out there's all sorts of things. For example, in this process of secularization, we're not just stripping out ideas, we're putting new ideas in. So, for example, in Western medicine, we now have vitamins. It never occurred to us historically that food could be good for anything except for filling you up. The notion that food contained this stuff that you can't see but is somehow good for your health was a very strange idea. I can see a chicken, I cannot see vitamin A. But we now have this idea of vitamins. New idea, it's been introduced. And we've got rid of old ideas that didn't seem to fit anymore. So, for example, we used to think that people got sick because there was some imbalance of of the 4 humors inside them. They had, you know, too much yellow bile. And the reason food made you sick or made you better was because it helped your body balance these 4 humors. And we've got rid of that idea, and we now think of vitamins. But that's okay. It's still the same basic idea going through. It's still nutrition. We just throw out one set of ideas and take on a new set of ideas. Now, for what it's worth, acupuncture has done exactly the same. Historically, you had the idea that sickness was caused by demons, and that acupuncture was good because it somehow helped you deal with the demons. And of course, modern acupuncturists know that this is not at all how acupuncture works. Acupuncture doesn't deal with demons; it deals with chi. So, in the same way as Western medicine has thrown out one set of ideas and adopted a new set of ideas, still Western medicine, acupuncture has thrown out one set of ideas. We don't have demons; we have chi. It's a new set of ideas. So we have in both things, as we move along, this churn of different ideas where we pick up new mechanisms, we throw out old mechanisms, it's all good. So that's where we started. That's this process of ideas changing. Where are we now? Well, I've got to be honest, right? Western medicine, it's not this perfectly neat unified whole. There are internal disputes within Western medicine. We're the best one in the world. You know, if you look at something like obesity, you ask one person, they say, oh, this is to do with genetics. And you ask another person, they say, well, this is to do with societal problems. And you ask another person, say, well, this is to do with nutrition. And there's all sorts of different ideas that go on in this. And there is disagreement about what the root cause and the major cause is, or what we should care about. So medicine is not a unified whole. There's not a total agreement on even the basics of what we're doing or why we're doing it. I'm going to use this phrase politely here. Medics tend to use what I'm going to call flexible terminology. So I'm a physicist. And I did my PhD at the National Physical Laboratory. Physicists, particularly metrologists, they care about using terms and using terms right. Medics, they pick up a term that seems to work and they just use it. So when a medic talks about stress, they talk about stress, right? I don't know why medics never seem to care about force over area, right? They might say that you're tense, but they never mention tensors. Why is that? It's because when a medic says stress, they don't mean stress, like not proper stress like a physicist understands. They've just made up their own term because it seemed like a good idea. Some people are going to let them off with that, and some physicists are going to get upset by it. Take your pick. Also with Western medicine, we have what I'm going to call evidential ambivalence, which is to say there is really, really, really good evidence for lots of stuff going on in medicine. I mean, we have drug trials, we have huge drug trials, and we give people medicine because the medicine works and because we've shown it to work, okay? It's an evidence-based scientific kind of thing. Go for scientific research, more funding, please. And while that's true, we also have to face up to the fact that there are bigger problems than we are comfortable with. There is within medical science what's referred to as a reproducibility crisis. We can get tests that show drugs work. And if you do the test again, they usually show that the drug, or often, sometimes, regularly, pick a word, depending on how negative you're feeling. Many of the tests, when you do them again, show that the drugs don't work, or they don't work like you thought they did first time round. In fact, you can go and you can do the statistics, and you can find that, statistically speaking, probably most medical published research findings are false. And that's awkward. Why don't we do the reproducibility tests? Because it's expensive. But that's a whole nother lecture series. Anyway, there exist within the medical community problems that science throws up, and whether you are willing to embrace these problems or sweep them under the rug is a matter of preference. Now, that's Western science. What happens with acupuncture? Well, okay, with Asian medicine. Okay, we have these internal disputes. I mean, take qi, for example. I said, okay, acupuncture works because of qi. The nature of qi is up for dispute. Is it a physical thing? Is it a non-physical thing? Is it a spiritual thing? Is it something which always resides within the body? Can it be taken out of the body? It's not a fixed question, and different people who do very similar things, who all consider themselves to be working with qi, will disagree about the basic nature of qi. It's also flexible terminology. Now, when someone says that qi is an energy, okay, they don't mean energy in the same way as a physicist means energy, in the same way as psychologists don't talk about stress, in the same way as physicists talk about stress. Whether you get upset by this, I'll leave that one to you. Also, there is evidence to show that acupuncture works. There's evidence to show that a lot of traditional Chinese medicine works. I mean, this is proper, good, evidence-based science. This is awesome stuff. Though, to give the full picture, at the same time, we also have to notice, please do not eat a tiger penis. It's not going to do much for you. There are problems within traditional Chinese medicine, and as we do scientific research into it, we throw up issues where it maybe doesn't work the way we hoped it worked. So here again, I'm not by this slide arguing that Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine are on exactly the same footing. I'm just going to show that a lot of the reasons why people object to traditional Chinese medicine, like because even its own practitioners can't work out what they're talking about, or because they say energy when of course it's no such thing, or because half of it's been debunked. None of those complaints of themselves are necessarily sufficient to throw it out altogether, or even to say it's not scientific. Now, arguably, you might say, yes, they are enough to throw it out as being not scientific. But if you do that, then you either have to say, I'm going to be deeply inconsistent myself, or you have to say, I think I should throw out Western medicine as being deeply unscientific too. I'm going to leave you to make that decision. So there is then the thought that says, maybe if we could just clean this up, if we're almost scientific, we're at least as scientific as Western medicine, but the bar has been set higher for traditional Chinese medicine because we're coming from this superstitious, religious, foreign background, right? If we can really set the bar high, if we can show that we're really properly scientific, if we can make it really beyond dispute as being scientific, then we'll be accepted as being science. You know, we've been set a higher bar than Western medicine because it's that bit weird and foreign. But if only we can really make it properly scientific, then it will be accepted within the West as a proper practice that's not charlatanism. It's a nice idea. It runs into a problem. This problem was, well, it wasn't highlighted by Mark Duke, but we can highlight it using a complaint of Mark Duke. Mark Duke did not like acupuncture, and here is that he's a Westerner and he's a Christian, and his complaint. Some Christians don't like acupuncture because they say it's this religious stuff that's going on. Here's Mark Duke's complaint against acupuncture. He said the entire universe, he feels, the acupuncturist feels, works to such precise, orderly fashion that it contains no mysteries beyond the scope of understanding. Because no supreme power, no lord of hosts created the world, the forces behind life and death and illness and health are not beyond man's comprehension. This was his railing against acupuncture. Now, is he here complaining that acupuncture is too religious, that Christians shouldn't be involved in it? Okay, so here's his complaint. Let's look at this with respect to toolistism. Okay, the entire universe, he feels, works to such a precise, orderly fashion that it contains no mysteries beyond the scope of understanding. Because no supreme power, we've got rid of ineffability. No lord of hosts, we've got rid of transcendence, created the world. The forces, those immanent, impersonal, mechanistic forces behind life and death and illness and health are not beyond man's comprehension. His complaint here is not that acupuncture is religion. His complaint here is that acupuncture is science. It's far too scientific. It takes too scientistic a view of the world for us to engage with it. This is therefore a caution for those who say, as long as we can strip out everything that is transcendent, ineffable, singular, special, different, personal about acupuncture, then it can be accepted. Well, in fact, possibly stripping out those things is the very thing that makes it problematic. So now, if we look at Mark Duke's objections here, let's now go back to the objections that we had to acupuncture at the very beginning of the lecture, which was to say that it's non-physical, immaterial, ineffable, mystical, and miraculous. Now, if you put those two side to side, we realize that we have a lot of problems with acupuncture. We have a lot of reasons why one might object to it. But the thing that we haven't managed to do is we haven't managed to work out whether or not we object because it's science or religion. And we certainly haven't managed to work out whether we could accept it because it's science or religion.
So now we're going to continue our discussion on acupuncture. Mike just examined to what extent acupuncture could fit within the two columns according to which we tend to distinguish science and religion. And now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this by looking at the theory that underlies acupuncture, which is normally understood as the theory of qi and of yin and yang. And already, as Michael had discussed, we can see that some aspects here, for example, when we're talking about qi, we're talking about something that appears to be immaterial, or certainly it's invisible, but it's something that you only you can only know, or you only seek to find its effect in the body, in something that is physical, in something that's material. If you go to acupuncture, you actually don't need to believe in qi, but you will feel things in your body. So it seems that, is it really purely based on belief, or is it based on knowledge? It's something that the qi itself is impersonal. It's not a personal deity. The theory of qi and of yin and yang is not something that some god revealed to humanity and that you must believe as a matter of faith. So we have a hard time to situate the theory of qi and of yin and yang within these two columns of science and religion. And so when we look at that, we might come to the conclusion that, well, you know, it's a bit like science and it's a bit like religion. But maybe that won't be a satisfactory answer to many. I mean, should we really be so wishy-washy? We need to have clear and precise knowledge. We need to know what it is. And so really then, if we look at it rigorously according to the standards of what science is and to the standards of what religion is, well, then we might come to the conclusion that acupuncture and all of these practices of Chinese medicine are neither science nor religion. Now, researchers have found that certain practices of acupuncture, and have published in scientific journals, for certain types of illnesses, acupuncture has been shown to be effective. Other types of science of Chinese medicine, certain herbs, qigong, and so on. So we found cases, we found certain types of practices and certain types of illnesses in which these forms of Chinese medicine are effective. So then maybe what the issue is that there are effective techniques there, but I mean, the theory is just completely wrong, or the theory is just some kind of belief. So what actually happened was that the Chinese people, they had a wrong theory, or they just had some kind of strange or supernatural type of belief system, but nonetheless, they just randomly stumbled onto these practices of acupuncture, Chinese herbalism, Qigong, and so on. So they randomly discovered some real things, and well, their theory is just pure fantasy. I mean, look at it. It's just so mystical and ineffable, poetic, and so on. But actually, it's not so simple. The theory of yin and yang and of qi is actually based on, we could say, a long time ago, thousands of years ago, as we can see in the first times that the first occurrences of the words yin and yang in Chinese language are in the Shijing, the Book of Odes, from around in the first millennium BC. And it seems that this theory arises from people's living in an agrarian society and observing the world around them. And so that they saw that their world was one of rhythms and cycles. And so there's a difference between the summer and the winter. There's a difference between day and night. And the difference is not an abstract difference. It's a difference that you actually feel in your body. And it's not only something that you feel differently in your body, but you're actually doing different things with your body during these different cycles. So during the daytime, you go out, and during the nighttime, you go in. During the summertime, you will go out more often. During the wintertime, you'll go inside more often. You'll feel hot and more energetic during the daytime and during the summer. You'll feel more, sleepy during the nighttime, more lethargic during the winter. And so there are different experiences of the world, different states of the body, different forms of movement and energy that are associated with these different periods during the cycles of day and night and during the summer and winter. They also noticed that the sun was located in different locations during the daytime and the nighttime, during the summer and the winter. And so that state of going out, so expansive state, going out during the daytime, going out during the summer, that was associated with the notion of yang. And the state of going in, of retraction during the nighttime and during the winter is associated with the notion of yin. And so this is a theory that's not a pure fantasy. It's a theory that's based on observation of the physical world around people. And so if we were to now just to eliminate some of the language that seems rather exotic or poetic around Chinese cosmology or qi and yin yang theory, we could express the theory in this way, that basically this is a theory of the world that sees entities as part of rhythmic systems. And these rhythmic systems oscillate between two alternative dynamic states. These alternative dynamic states, these alternating states, are characterized by expansion and contraction. The expansion state is called yang, and the contracting state is called yin. Now, these expanding and contracting states are relative to each other. An expanding state gradually turns into a contracting state and vice versa. Just like when you breathe, you expand and then you contract. Entities themselves, such as human bodies, are rhythmic systems, and their condition is shaped by the rhythms, by the relations of expansion and contraction of their constituent elements. So, according to this theory, the relationship between expanding and contracting states generates a dynamic energy field. This energy is called qi. Qi manifests different qualities in different configurations. Energy flows between elements of the system in different states, following pathways that are based on the shape of the energy field. Now, according to this theory, there are optimal and suboptimal relations between expanding and contracting states within the system. Under suboptimal conditions, the system will break down. And under optimal systems, the system will flourish. System maintenance and recovery are based on adjusting the relationships between the two dynamic states. And optimal relationships will generate an energy field with an optimal circulation of qi and will manifest as health, vitality, and prosperity. So let's just think about some of the aspects of this theory. On the one hand, this is a theory that describes rhythms and relationships within the physical world. But it's also a theory that has moral values built into it. So it's a theory that considers that relationships are important and that harmonizing relationships are important. And that if we have harmonious relationships with the world around us, within our body, and with other people around us, to the extent that these relationships are harmonized, there will be health, happiness, and prosperity. And to the extent that those relationships are not harmonized, there will be disease, lack of health, lack of happiness, and lack of prosperity. So this is a theory that has moral values built into it. It's a theory that has evolved. And nowadays, in fact, it seems to be very systematic, but when we look at how it evolved from the Warring States period until the Han Dynasty and throughout subsequent periods in Chinese history, we can see how new elements were added into the theory, how elements were discarded from the theory, how different schools of thought debated and argued about different elements and different understandings of the theory. This is a theory that is also applied in different domains of knowledge. So the domains of health, illness, and longevity, which we can see applied in fields such as Chinese medicine, herbs, acupuncture, yang sheng, and qigong. It's a theory that's applied in combat through the martial arts. It's applied in gardening, landscape, and architecture through arts such as the feng shui. It's applied in the relationships between the living and the dead, as can be seen in Chinese Buddhism, where the world of yang is seen as the world of the living and the world of yin is seen as the world of the dead. It's applied in the relationships with stars, deities, and spirits, as in Taoism, and it's applied in social and political relationships, as in Confucianism. Now, if you have some familiarity with some of these different domains of knowledge, you might say, well, wait a minute, well, not quite exactly the same. And that's exactly true. So these different domains have different variations of the theory. And sometimes these variations are contradictory with each other. And yet, nonetheless, some of the basic components of the theory are held in common in these different domains of knowledge, and ideas that emerge in one domain of knowledge can circulate or be adopted in other domains of knowledge. So what's going to happen then? Let's say we just take this attitude. There are certain things that work in Chinese medicine and acupuncture and so on. So there are facts there. But, well, that theory was just some kind of fantasy. So what's going to happen then if let's do that. Let's try to make acupuncture into a science. So we'll keep the facts and we'll drop the theory. Well, what's going to happen is the first thing that we're going to drop those values, the moral values that are attached to that theory are going to be dropped. All those concepts and experience that led to the facts being discovered are going to be dropped. Now think about it. Using experimental Western science, we've been able to confirm for certain practices and certain health states and certain illnesses the efficacy of some dimensions or some practices and techniques that are associated with Chinese medicine. But then that raises the question that if the theory underlying it was wrong, and that Western thought and Western medicine has the correct theory, then why is it that that correct theory never led to the discovery of something like acupuncture and other forms of Chinese medicine. So if we keep the facts and drop the theory, we're going to drop the concepts and experience that led to those facts being discovered. And we'll also drop the theory that interconnects so many different systems of knowledge. So what we find then is that the assumption that in something like acupuncture, there are facts, but those facts were discovered randomly and following a wrong theory. But when we look at it more closely, we find that it's not something that's random. And the theory, well, maybe the theory is wrong, but it's certainly not pure fantasy. It's actually something that's quite coherent, quite systematic, and that's actually based on the observation of the world. So then maybe we might say, okay, well, that's a philosophy. So we can keep the facts on one side, and we'll admit that there's an interesting philosophy on the other side. But that's not going to work very well either. Why is it that in philosophy departments in universities around the world, usually Chinese philosophy is there will maybe be one course in Chinese philosophy. Maybe one teacher teaches Chinese philosophy and almost everybody else teaches Western philosophy. People say that Chinese philosophy is not really philosophy. And why? It is not purely abstract. It's actually based on the observation. It's actually based on embodied experience. It's not purely logic. It doesn't happen in a purely abstract and logical fashion. And so therefore, it doesn't even count as philosophy. Now, of course, other people argue about that. It's an endless argument, and certainly many of you, I'm sure, would be very offended to hear that that all of this yin-yang theory and so on is not philosophy. And certainly, I won't get into this argument. but the point is that it is actually controversial. There are actually controversies as to whether Chinese cosmology and all of these different ideas even count as philosophy. And the reason they're controversial is because they are not purely abstract, and they are actually connected with an embodied experience of the world, which then again takes us back to the idea that, well, then is this science if it's based on an embodied experience of the world? So then basically one conclusion then is that, well, it's nothing. It's neither science nor religion, nor philosophy. Just throw it out because it's really nothing at all. Well, okay, maybe we can do that. But then maybe the acupuncturist might turn the tables around and say, well, maybe it's science and religion that are nothing. I mean, yes, maybe there's an objective world, but the objective world, we only encounter the objective world through our subjective experience. And our subjective experience is shaped by the objective world around us. So we don't live in column 1 of our science religion 2 columns, and we don't live in column 2 of our science religion or subjective objective 2 columns. We experience no body without experiencing a mind, and we experience no mind without experiencing a body. It's impossible to live in one column where there's only a body, and it's impossible to live in another column where there's only a mind or subjectivity. And so the acupuncturist might go turn the tables around and tell the scientist and the religionist who insist on those 2 columns, and the acupuncturist might tell them, well, if you guys really think that you can rely only on column 1 or rely only on column 2, well, you guys are just so confused. You just have no idea what life is all about. They might ask, where in the world would we find only the things in one column? Is there such a world where everything is repeatable and regular, where there's nothing unrepeatable and singular? where you have pure and absolute knowledge and nothing but knowledge, where everything is objective and there's no subjectivity, where everything is visible, where everything is testable, visible, where there's only physical, material, and comprehensible things? Is there such a reality? And is there the reality of column 2? Is there a reality where there is only belief, only subjectivity, only the invisible, only the untestable, only the immaterial and the ineffable, only the personal and the irrational? Is there such a world? And who would even want such a world? Who would want a world where everything is repeatable and regular, concrete and physical and material, and where there is nothing but that? And who would want a world where there is nothing but subjectivity and unrepeatable singularity and ineffable irrationality?
So David has just provocatively posed a question by a particularly confrontational acupuncturist who says, well, maybe what you're trying to do with your science and religion is nothing. So let's not get too offended by that and throw it out immediately. It's a claim. Anything that doesn't straddle both columns is not worth engaging with. The universe we face straddles both columns. There exist physical objects out there, and we have an awareness of them in here, and those two interlink somehow. The physical universe and our engagement with it necessarily straddles both columns. And our acupuncturist says, if your vision of what you're trying to achieve can't deal with that, your vision is not worth the effort. I'm going to go back and do my thing that doesn't fit in your neat columns. So that's a claim. There are 3 responses to this. One is, this acupuncture is wrong. I'm sorry, right? We can separate out column 1 and column 2, right? We can look at the world in this nice objective fashion, and religionists can go and look at the world in this subjective touchy-feely hug-a-tree fashion, and they're separate, and we can do that. This acupuncturist is just mistaken. And as well as separating them out, of course, the corollary to that is to say, and having separated them out, they remain worth engaging with. They remain significant and meaningful and interesting and suitably rich, that they are worth my time. That's option 1. Option 2 is to say, yes, the acupuncturist is completely right. We cannot separate column 1 from column 2. And unfortunately, this means that science, which lives in column 1, is not significant, meaningful, interesting, worth pursuing. It cannot touch on the universe as the universe exists. Throw it out. And religion suffers the same problem, living in column 2. Religion is a waste of our time. The acupuncturist is right. We all go home. Option 3 is to say the acupuncturist is right. We cannot separate column 1 from column 2. And yet science is still significant. It's interesting, it's meaningful, it's rich, it's worth doing, it's worth our time, because science isn't restricted to column 1. Science, as we've mentioned before in this series, science does straddle over into column 2, necessarily so. For all the effort, and we go to a lot of effort to cram science into column 1, science resists that. And what we do, which is different from what we often think we're doing, what we do when we do science does straddle both columns. And therefore, even our confrontational acupuncturist can look at it and say, yes, that is worth doing, because it really does look at the universe as we encounter it. And we can also say that religion is still significant. Religion is still interesting and meaningful and rich and worth engaging with, because religion, for all the effort that people go to say, keep it in your private life, keep it in your subjective opinion, it's just to do with faith and values and morality and nothing that touches on the external world. Religion is not like that. Religion is big and broad and necessarily talks about facts and necessarily talks about objectivity and necessarily talks about the natural world. And religion too engages in both of these columns with the world as we have it. So we can turn to our acupuncturist quite happily if we adopt option 3, and both David and I for the rest of this course are going to adopt option 3, and say, yes, maybe the acupuncturist is right, that anything which is so thin and impoverished that it fits in one column is not worth engaging with. But neither science nor religion is so thin and impoverished. So let's just look at some of the ways in which science and religion don't just cross the boundaries that we're used to, but utterly annihilate them. Let's look at transcendence in science, right? Science, and this is the heart of science. Science calls our gaze up from the here and now to that which lies beyond. It invokes immaterial forces described by non-physical numbers. There's no 3 that you see anywhere. It's this non-physical thing that transcends the visible world around us. It draws us on and up beyond to that which cannot be seen. We cannot see atoms because they're too small, or galaxies because they're too distant, or wave functions because they're too paradoxical. We can't see the Big Bang because it only happened once in this wonderfully singular, unrepeatable fashion. This is the heart of science, which the breathtaking beauty of what we get from Hubble, or the mind-bending complexity of string theory, it abstracts us from the mundane needs of the day-to-day, and it lifts our eyes to the ineffable and the incomprehensible. Now, science, for what it's worth, is an utter contrast to the mundane, quotidian callings of religion. For all that we would love to lose ourselves in the beyond, religion won't let us. It won't let us abstract ourselves from our situation. It consistently draws us back to the very concrete needs of the widow and the orphan that stands visible before us. Religion presses us to hear the explicit cries for material aid, to fulfill their very human needs for regular meals, lest they face imminent hunger. Religion is not this big, out there, abstract picture. It's the very real, concrete cry of the world around us. So at the start of this lecture, we wanted to know whether acupuncture should be counted as religion or science. And we've now reached the end of this lecture, and we've realized that religion actually does everything that we thought science should be doing. And we've realized that science looks a lot more religious than religion does. You're welcome. Having now, over the course of this lecture, shown not only that these categories can and do and must mix, we've shown that we can coherently view systems in which they mix. We don't say, oh, this is a contradiction, or this is nonsense, or this is rubbish. We can say we have meaningful, sensible systems in which we can and do engage, which cross over these boundaries. We don't need to be scared of something which seems to blur our nice categories. So that's where we've got to now. In future lectures, we're going to unpack that further to see how we can really get to grips with understanding a science which will not be bound to our dull little categories, and a religion which is rich and vibrant and expansive and will not be put in the box where we might otherwise want to keep it.